What up nerds, my name's Ryan, I did my HSC in 2019 and in this video I'm going to guide you through an essay paragraph that I wrote on how film visual techniques convey meaning in the film One Night the Moon. Firstly, I'll analyze a series of quotes and scenes, then show how they're used in an example paragraph that I actually used in my HSC. Click the link in the top right to see the full playlist for One Night the Moon. Firstly, we have the traveling to church scene, so let's take a look at that. So in this scene, mise-en-scene is used to show a difference in power between the two families, a difference in social status, a difference in rights under the law. And that's conveyed by the Aboriginal family walking on the land and the European family using a horse and carriage, as well as the fact that the Europeans are literally above the land in terms of they are physically above the land. In this next scene, we see a distinction between the two families. I'll just show the clips briefly because I have actually done this in a different video.
The night sky, one night the moon came choo-chooing by, called all the sleepers to come for a ride.
The European family is shown as nuclear. So they are a nuclear family, nuclear being father, mother, child. And it shows the European concept of family being quite closed off and distinct and defined. Whereas the Aboriginal family here is more of an extended family. And it shows that the Aboriginal values around family is more open and inclusive. In the next scene, we see Emily following the moon. Let's take a look at this scene. So the first thing you might notice is this looks a little strange for nighttime. Why is that? Because it's shot as a day for night. It's shot in a day for night world. And that's basically a film technique in which you actually shoot the film during the day, but you manipulate it in terms of the color grading and a bunch of other things to make it look as if it's been filmed in the night. Like they would have likely added this moon. I wouldn't be surprised if the entire skyline was added afterwards. I'm not sure what technology they had then, but basically you can tell that it's not filmed during the night because you can see all the detail on the grass. You can see the light is actually on the left side of Emily and the shadows are going this way, despite the fact that the main light source in the actual scene is the moon that's in front of them. So you would expect her entire back to be dark. It's usually done when there's not a high enough budget to have specialized cameras to film during the night. It's a lot cheaper to actually film during the day and present it as if it is the night. And similar to the lullaby scene, we have this kind of ethereal camera movement, this ethereal cinematography, which has this very fairy tale-like connotation. So it's very fairy tale-like, and it presents Emily in this trope, in this like kind of archetypal idea of a lost child, so of the lost child. That's I like to call it like an identity that is being conveyed through the film visual techniques. In the next scene, we see some really superb use of Dutch angles, vectors, and body language. So watch carefully and have a look out for those three techniques. So let's take a look at the scene now. So here we have the Dutch angle, and that serves to show that something is awry, something is wrong. And a Dutch angle is basically when the framing of the shot is not straight, it's crooked. And so you can see here that the horizon is not actually parallel with the base of the shot. It's not actually parallel with the base of the frame. There's some angle in between these two things. And that's what's called a Dutch angle. It usually serves to show that something is wrong. Something is wrong. And what is wrong? Well, the search party is failing. And we see this vector between Jim and Rose, between the eyes of Jim and Rose, and it serves to establish a connection. So there's a vector, and that's basically just like an imaginary line between 2 points, or even from one point pointing out. So there's a vector, and it shows the connection between them, connection between their thoughts. And then we see this really sad use of body language as Jim dips his head, and Rose also dips her head into her palm. And in the case of Jim, it gives off this sense of failure and disgrace. And in the case of Rose, it gives this really sad and tragic feeling to the audience. Jim has failed in his role to try and find Emily, and the mother is obviously extremely sad about it. Absolutely in a hole. Okay, so the next scene is the one with the bird soaring over the landscape. So let's take a look at that. So in this scene, we have a medium panning shot being a shot where the camera is going like this. We see the bird soaring over the landscape, and I like to think of this as a physical manifestation of the Aboriginal concept of the spirit of the land. And there's the song near the end of the film sung by Kev Carmody or something, I think, if I remember correctly, called Spirit of This Land, I think. And I like to see this as a foreshadowing. And I think this particular scene was before the search party, or when the search party started searching. I like to see it as a foreshadowing of how the humans are overpowered by the spirit of the land, the observer. And it's also accompanied by that didgeridoo in the soundtrack, which links it to this Aboriginal culture. So I'll show you how I utilize those in an example paragraph. First, I'll read it through, and then I'll briefly explain the structure and where I've integrated the techniques. Visual techniques can be used effectively to convey the culture and identity of characters within a text. For instance, in One Night the Moon, an early scene shows the Ryan family riding a horse and carriage on their way to church. By contrast, Albert's family is walking. The mise-en-scene is crafted in such a way that emphasises the difference in power between the white Australians and the Aboriginal people. The Ryans are positioned higher in the frame, whereas Albert's family is lower down. Furthermore, the cultural differences surrounding family values are contrasted using the same technique of mise-en-scene. The Ryan family is depicted as a nuclear family, father, mother, and child. This is contrasted to the Aboriginal community, who are depicted in a large group altogether. Friends and extended family members alike are shown to gather and live in the same area with a much more communal sense of living. This shows that the Aboriginal culture is more open and inclusive, whereas the European culture prefers distinct borders. Cinematography is also frequently utilized to convey different meanings relating to identity and culture. For example, when Emily leaves her room to follow the moon, ethereal camera movement emphasizes her identity as the archetypal lost child. In a day-for-night world, Emily is presented in an almost fairy tale-like manner. Additionally, when the search party seems to be failing in their mission to find Emily, Dutch angles are used to show that something is awry. Specifically, this is used when Jim enters the gate of his property. Without the need for dialogue, the crafting of visual techniques conveys to the viewer that something is wrong. The vector between the eyes of Jim and Rose establishes a connection in their thoughts. The audience can feel Rose asking whether there's any hope. The body language of Jim lowering his head and breaking eye contact conveys a sense of failure and disgrace. Similarly, Rose lowers her head into her palm, displaying the heartbreak she suffers from her lost child. Furthermore, the Aboriginal concept of the spirit of this land is demonstrated in both visuals and song. At one point, a medium panning shot of a bird soaring over the landscape is shown, while didgeridoo is played in the soundtrack. The bird and its accompanying cultural music can be interpreted as a physical manifestation of the spirit of the land, linked to Aboriginal culture as a powerful observer. Film visual techniques are used in One Night the Moon to demonstrate culture, different perspectives on family and land, as well as the archetypal identity of the lost child. And so we have an introduction here. Visual techniques can be used to effectively convey the culture and identity of characters within a text. That's an idea that exists in the wider world. It's not contingent upon One Night the Moon existing. Always start your essay paragraphs off with an idea that exists in the wider world. Then we have this little section about social status, how social status and power is conveyed through visual techniques, the visual techniques being mise-en-scene. We also have another use of mise-en-scene conveying the different values around family, the different ideas about family. Cinematography being used to show the lost child identity, and it's kind of gives off this fairy tale vibe. Cinematography, ethereal camera movement is used to show that. Then we have this scene that shows failure it's an example of failure. And the way that it shows failure is through Dutch angles showing that something is awry. We have the lack of dialogue as well, the vector between the eyes of Jim and Rose, and the defeated body language of both of them. And then lastly, we have the idea of the spirit of the land conveyed through the medium panning shot of the birds soaring over, as well as the didgeridoo in the soundtrack. But that's more of a musical aspect of it. And then standard conclusion, film visual techniques are used in One Night the Moon to demonstrate all these ideas up here. Okay, now I have 5 videos in total on One Night the Moon, one being racism and prejudice, cultural significance of land, my personal favorite, family and life, visual techniques, which is this one, and musical techniques. You can find all of those in the playlist in the middle of the screen. If you click on that, go watch them. Good luck in your HSC exams, and I'll see you in the next video.